Mystery exploration. Darkness. History. Creepy apparition. Scary. Welcome to Cursed Stories. Hello, Night Wanderer. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell. The shadows appreciate it. Tell me where you're watching from and what time the nightmares begin. Now lean in. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Let's begin.
Everything started with a flyer. Looking for participants, paid sleep study, $2,500 compensation. 1 overnight stay. No known sleep disorders. Call to apply. I was unemployed, behind on rent, living off microwave noodles and fear. Easy money just to sleep? Hell, I didn't even read the fine print. I showed up at the address, a medical-looking building off campus that smelled like disinfectant and quiet regret. A woman in scrubs greeted me. Too friendly. Too still. Her badge said Dr. L.A. She led me down long hallways lit with flickering fluorescence, into a small white room. One bed. One camera. Wires. Electrodes. Air so clean it felt dead. Lie down, she said. You'll feel a little pinch. Then, sleep. That's when everything started to go wrong. I dreamed of a facility. Not that facility. A different one. Bigger. Darker. Deeper. The walls weren't white. They were a dull, fleshy pink. Something organic pulsed just beneath the surface, like muscle. Or membrane. I walked barefoot down a hallway. The floor was warm. Other people were there too, some in hospital gowns, others in regular clothes. None of them spoke. They just stared straight ahead. Wide eyes. Open mouths. A man in a lab coat walked up to me. His face moved too fast, flickering like an old film reel skipping frames. His voice sounded like static pushed through clenched teeth. Welcome to level 1. I woke up. Or at least, I thought I did. The room looked the same. Same bed, same camera. But Dr. Ellie was different. Her smile was wrong. Too wide. Like her skin had been stitched into place by someone who didn't quite understand how faces were supposed to work. Did you sleep well? She asked, tilting her head far too much. The angle was unnatural. I'm done. I want to leave. I shot upright. She blinked once. Then again. But this time, the eyelids moved sideways. You're not finished yet, she said. Every time I woke up, I was in another layer. Each room felt a little less real than the last. The ceiling rippled like water. The walls breathed. In one version, the bed had veins. In another, the camera blinked at me, literally blinked, like an eye. They told me I was making progress. That I was doing well. No subject has ever made it this far, one of them said. His voice dripped like molasses, slow, syrupy, and wrong. That's when I realized they weren't studying how I slept. They were studying how I dreamed. And I was sinking layer by layer, deeper into their world. That's when I started seeing the others, the real ones. People who'd also signed up for the sleep study. One girl, Sasha, told me she'd been there for weeks. Maybe months. They keep us dreaming, she whispered. They feed on the transitions. That flicker between sleep and waking. There's energy in it. I asked how we could wake up. She laughed, a horrible, empty sound, like something rattling in a dry throat. You can't. Not unless you reach the bottom. But no one knows where that is. One night, if you can even call it night here, I found a mirror. It was cracked. Blurry. But I saw my reflection. My skin was turning gray. My eyes sunken. Something was moving under the surface of my neck, twitching, like a worm squirming just beneath the flesh. I screamed. The mirror rippled, then showed me another version of myself. Smiling. Clean. Perfect. Behind her were the dream researchers. Their faces stretched like melting wax. Mouths open in silent howls. I shattered the mirror. It bled. That's when I started fighting back. Refusing to sleep inside the dream. Walking endlessly just to avoid the transitions. They punished me. One level down, they took time away. No day. No night. Just a dull gray light pressing into my skull like a migraine that never ended. In another layer, I heard voices. My mother. My first girlfriend. My own voice. all whispering behind the walls. They knew my memories, they knew my fears, and they used them. That level broke me. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Whispered, "Please? I just want to wake up." That's when it happened. The chief investigator. He didn't wear a lab coat. He wore my face. But not exactly, just enough to feel wrong. The teeth were too long. The smile never moved. The eyes were glassy, blank, no pupils at all. "You're doing well," he said, in my voice. "You're getting close to level 0. "What's level 0? I croaked. "Wake up," he said. "If you survive." Then he touched my forehead. I screamed. I fell, crashing through layers, like ice cracking beneath my feet. Flashes of rooms, colors, memories. My 5th birthday, my grandfather's funeral, my first kiss. All of it peeling away, layer by layer, as if I was being stripped down to a raw, dreaming core. And then, silence. Darkness. One word burned into my vision like static etched on a dead TV screen. Level 0. I opened my eyes. I was back. Back in the original unit. Bright lights. The real Dr. Ellie. My clothes neatly folded. A clipboard next to the bed. "You've been under for 7 hours," she said, smiling gently. "How do you feel?" I broke down in tears. Relief flooded through me like rain after a long, cracking drought. I grabbed her wrist. "It was horrible," I said. I thought I was trapped." She handed me a cup of water. Said the brain can play strange tricks during sleep. Hypnagogic. Nested dreams. Lucid cycles. All perfectly normal. I signed the forms. Took the check. Left that place as fast as I could. I ran all the way home. That night, I tried not to sleep. Every time I shut my eyes I saw them. The researchers. My reflection. My own face, rotting. I paced around my room. Drank coffee. Chewed my fingernails until they bled. But eventually, I passed out. And I woke up in a room I recognized. A bed. A camera. A clipboard. The door opened, and Dr. Ellie walked in. Only this time, she didn't even bother wearing skin. Her face was a rotting mess of tentacles and teeth, eyes blinking like barnacles growing out of her skull. Her voice didn't come from her mouth, it came from everywhere. From inside my ears. My teeth. My bones. "You reached level 0, she said. "But you never left." I screamed. Clawed at the walls. Tried to wake up. Tried to move. Tried to breathe. Nothing changed. The room stayed still. The clipboard now read. Subject, Ethan Cross. Sleep study, Phase 3, simulated awakening. Response, highly compliant. Status, core integrity breached. Extraction, denied. Retention, indefinite. I wasn't dreaming anymore. This was real. A reality they built. A prison made of belief. And the worst part? Every time I think I've woken up, there's another clipboard. Just now, someone knocked at my apartment door. I answered. A man was standing there, breathless, holding a crumpled flyer. "Hey," he said. "Did you do that sleep study thing?" His hands were shaking. "I can't wake up." I smiled, my mouth opening wider than it should. "Come in," I said. "Let me tell you how it starts." The guy moved in late last Saturday night. I know because I woke up near midnight to the screech of metal on metal. He'd rammed his U-Haul into the dumpster outside my bedroom. Not bumped. Not nudged. Rammed. I sat up in bed, the sound still ringing in my ears like a scream. From my second-story window, I watched him step out to inspect the damage. He was tall. Absurdly tall. Almost as tall as the U-Haul, and when he rested a hand on his hip, the space between his arm and chest looked big enough to fit a whole person inside. I couldn't tell what he looked like. The streetlight caught only glimpses, the outline of a square jaw, the faint gleam of pale skin, the shine of his white button-down. But even from a distance, something about him felt off. I considered going out to help him. Just say something neighborly. But my gut twisted into knots. A voice inside whispered, "Don't open that door." I went back to bed, telling myself he'd probably appreciate me pretending I hadn't seen anything. But there was a knock at my door early the next morning. You can't imagine the jolt in my chest when I looked through the peephole and saw the same man, or at least the same shirt. From my angle, I could only see him from the chest down. Broad, unmoving, still in that starched white button-down. He was just standing there at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, silent. Did he see me watching him last night? Was he mad I didn't help? I almost didn't answer. But a part of me, the polite, socially anxious, people-pleasing part, told me I'd have to face him eventually. I took a breath, readied an apology, and opened the door. He stepped back, grinning wide. No teeth. Just gums. Blackened lips curled back in a smile too big for his face. His skin was an ashen gray, like someone dipped him in wet cement. His eyes didn't move. Didn't blink. "Let's hang out," he said, in a high-pitched, sing-song tone. No emotion, just the words. Like a glitchy cartoon from an old VHS tape. Friendly. Excited. Rehearsed. As a 6-foot-tall man, I had to crane my neck to meet his eyes. And when I did, something washed over me. It was warmth. Nostalgia. I was back in my childhood home, the smell of cookies baking in the kitchen, sunlight through the windows, my mother humming. I wanted to say yes. I fought it. I knew I didn't know this guy. I knew. But part of me did. Or wanted to. I stood there, teetering in and out of the doorway, fighting this invisible tether pulling me toward him. "Not right now, Mikey," I said. I blinked. Did I just call him Mikey? I hesitated, then shut the door. Locked it. Deadbolt, chain, all of it. Back in bed, my heart pounding, I whispered to myself, how the hell did I know his name? But like a dream, the certainty faded. Maybe I'd made it up. Just blurted the name out. I told myself it didn't matter. I just needed sleep. I woke up hours later, sunlight leaking through the blinds, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. I lay there staring at the ceiling, vaguely remembering something strange, but my brain hadn't pieced it all together yet. Then I remembered the door. The knock. The name. Mikey. The moment I thought it, my stomach turned. I tried to shake it off. Played video games, rewatched a season of Friends, scrolled through garbage on my phone. But the unease didn't lift. It clung to me like wet clothes. I chalked it up to Sunday dread. I've always hated Sundays. That slow, quiet tension, like something's creeping up behind you and you can't turn fast enough to see it. Maybe I just hate my job more than most people. At 5:30 a.m. Monday morning, another knock. I froze. No one knocks at 5:30. Not unless something's wrong. I held my breath. Waited. But it came again, louder this time. Reluctantly, I opened the door. He was standing there, both hands out, palms up like he was offering some sacred gift. On them sat the most beautiful pastry I'd ever seen. Light and golden, fluffy like a cloud, glazed with chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel. It practically shimmered in the porch light. I didn't even think. I reached for it. The moment I touched it, memories flooded me. I was in a warm kitchen, seated at a wooden table. Mikey, taller, younger, smiling, stood at the counter frosting a perfect cupcake. He brought it to me like a birthday gift. I took a bite and nearly cried. He was my best friend. I'd known him forever. He was safety. He was home. And I loved him. But something twisted under the memories. A tight, sharp fear. Like eyes were watching me from every angle. Like I was being studied. "Let's hang out," Mikey said, reaching for me. His voice snapped me back. Too bright. Too cheerful. Too wrong. I stumbled backward and slammed the door shut. Breathing hard, I looked down at the pastry still in my hands. Except now, it was just bread. Two mismatched slices slathered with crude chunks of peanut butter and jelly. Not even a sandwich. Slabs of jelly smeared on the outside, dripping onto my wrist. Like it was made by someone who didn't understand how food works. I dropped it. At work, I couldn't focus. The algebra textbook I was editing might as well have been written in a different language. My head kept looping back to Mikey. To that strange, too sweet memory. A memory that didn't belong to me. Because I knew I'd never met him before. But I remembered him. I remembered sleepovers, road trips, Christmas mornings, kisses. It was like my mind had been hijacked and stuffed with a childhood that never happened. I made a decision. No matter what, I wouldn't answer the door again. I wouldn't talk to him. Wouldn't even look at him. If I saw Mikey, I'd run. But when I pulled into my driveway that evening, he was already waiting. He didn't knock this time. He was just standing there in the parking lot like he'd been waiting all day, unmoving, arms hanging at his sides, head tilted slightly like a curious dog. His grin widened when he saw me, gums stretched taut, lips dry and cracking, eyes locked onto mine before I could even slam the car door. "Let's hang out," he said, beaming. I turned to go. I meant to turn, to walk away. But I didn't. Instead, the moment I looked at him, my chest filled with light. I felt warm, safe, happy, like stepping out into spring after a long, gray winter. I smiled back without meaning to. He didn't move his body, not really, but somehow, he leaned in, just his head lowering toward me, bending forward without bending his back. His face was too close. His breath didn't smell like anything. His eyes, I couldn't describe them. Not really. But looking into them made something ancient stir in me. Something not mine. And then the memories came. I was small. A toddler. Laughing. My feet kicked at the sky as I soared forward on a swing set, and Mikey, tall and proud, stood behind me, pushing me again and again. His hands were huge on the chains. It was my birthday. I was blowing out candles. Mikey lit them one by one with fingers the color of cigarette ash. His long yellow nails curled over the lighter like claws. We were on a baseball field. He was my coach, patting my shoulder with encouragement. He was my best friend. He was my brother. He was my teacher. He was everything. And then we were older. I sat in the back seat of my car, sweaty palms pressed against the upholstery. Mikey leaned in. I kissed him. His lips were dry, cracked, cold. But my heart thumped in my chest like it meant something. It meant love. "Let's hang out," he whispered, eyes still glued to mine. I took a step forward. My body moved without me. But somewhere deep inside, an alarm screamed. Not in words, not even in thoughts, just a soundless, primal howling. Something feral clawed at the inside of my skull, trying to tear me away from him. I imagined going into his apartment. I imagined sitting on his couch, laughing, hugging, falling into those fake memories like they were real. Then I imagined screaming. Bloody, endless screaming. Pain like I'd never known. A void with a voice. I ran. Something in me broke loose. I turned and sprinted. I didn't look back. I slammed into my apartment and locked the door behind me. My breath came in gasps. I heard nothing outside. No knock. No footsteps. Just silence. Then it came, a knock. Soft. Precise. I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers and dialed 911. I told them there was a man who kept knocking. That he wouldn't leave. That I was scared. They said they'd send someone. I sat by the door and waited. Every second dragged like an hour. Then came the cruiser's headlights. I saw them through my window. And when I peeked through the peephole, Mikey was still there. Waiting. I didn't move from the door. I crouched there, one eye pressed to the peephole, just watching him. He didn't knock again. Just stood there. Smiling. Still. Silent. Familiar. The cruiser rolled up slow. The lights clicked off. One door opened, and the officer stepped out, casual as anything. He didn't look tense. Didn't have his hand on his holster. He wasn't scanning the area like someone who'd been told a neighbor was being harassed. He just strolled up like he was meeting an old friend. "Tommy," the officer said, voice bright. "What's going on, man? Long time no see." My heart dropped into my stomach. "Let's hang out," Mikey said. The officer smiled. "Of course, man. I really can't thank you enough for last time." I blinked hard. Last time? Through the peephole, I watched them walk away together like they were brothers, like they'd known each other forever. Mikey's impossibly long arm draped around the cop's shoulder like they were teenagers heading into a party. They disappeared into his apartment. The door closed. Then the screaming started. I backed away from the door and covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was wet. Not just loud, but alive, like something was being torn and devoured and sucked dry while it screamed its last breath. It echoed through the vents, through the walls, through my bones. Then, silence. I didn't sleep. I just lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, praying for the sun. In the morning, 2 new officers showed up. I told them the truth, or part of it. That someone was harassing me. That a guy kept knocking and wouldn't go away. That I hadn't seen the officer again. They knocked on every door, even Mikey's. I didn't hear screams this time. Just laughter. Happy, relieved laughter. The kind you only hear at airport reunions and surprise parties. Like someone had found something they'd lost for years. Like coming home. I haven't left my apartment since. It's been a week. I got fired. The food's almost gone. I keep the lights on all day and night. I moved the couch in front of the door. I haven't opened the blinds. I know I'll have to go outside eventually. But what if he's there? What if he says it again? Right now, I know he's dangerous. I know none of the memories are real. I know he's something else. Not human, not alive, not anything that belongs here. But what happens when I see him? Will I remember? Will I feel safe? Will I smile? Will I follow him in? Or worse, will I already have? Because some nights I wake up with crumbs in my bed, bits of peanut butter on my fingers, a taste in my mouth like burnt sugar and rotting fruit. And sometimes, I think I can remember swinging, and laughing, and kissing him back. There's a place in the desert with incredible ecological diversity, called a Sky Island. Specifically, the Sky Island is a 9,000-foot mountain surrounded by scorching, lifeless lowlands, its forested slopes rising abruptly from the desert floor like a green fragment of another world, drifting above the heat haze. It's the only place in the continental US you can find jaguars. Of all the time I spent looking for animals there, I never thought something would be looking for me. I would have loved to see a jaguar. But I wasn't hunting predators. I was there for reptiles, venomous, scaled, elusive creatures that most people avoid, but I couldn't resist. Dozens of species of rattlesnakes alone slither across its elevation zones. Colored lizards, spiny-tailed iguanas, Sonoran whipsnakes, each adapted to the dry, stony ridges or the cooler piney heights. I loved them enough that I took several days off from work, drove across 2 states, and burned half my savings just for a chance to spot them in the wild. The drive was relaxing at first. Long stretches of dry, cracked earth lined with creosote and towering saguaro cacti flicked past under golden sunlight. Those dusty, open roads gave me time to think, though now, I avoid them whenever I can. Especially at night. Especially alone. Usually I'd make this trip with some friends. My herpetology professor first told me about the area. A couple old college buddies shared my interest, and we made the pilgrimage once or twice before. This year, they all had plans. I told myself it would be meditative, solitary. And it was. That might have been the problem. The road I was on stretched for miles, twisting through scorched valleys, my car and the stars the only lights for hours. Scraggly creosote bushes drifted in and out of my high beams like ghosts, their twisted limbs casting strange shadows. I drove slow to avoid the toads and snakes that ventured onto the pavement at night, hoping to soak in the residual warmth. Jackrabbits darted out occasionally, spooked by the engine's purr, just long-legged flashes of fur vanishing into the dark. During the day, this road might get a couple trucks or park rangers. But between midnight and 3 a.m., you could die out there and no one would find you for days. That kind of isolation forces your mind to unspool in unpleasant directions. You stop thinking about cell service or your car's radiator and start thinking about what else might be watching, unseen, from the dark. I hit the hazards and stepped out to help a spadefoot toad across the road. I couldn't stand the idea of one getting pancaked. Outside the car, the air was cool against my skin, and the desert was hushed, crickets singing like faint static in the background. The road was darker than I remembered. The moon was hidden behind a wall of clouds. I slipped on a nitrile glove and gently scooped the little toad up, admiring the strange softness of its skin, its camouflage colors that shimmered green and brown beneath the moonlight. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures, zooming in on the brilliant eyes, like tiny emerald marbles. It didn't move, just blinked slowly, waiting. I wondered what it thought, if it even had thoughts like we do. Then I heard a rustle. It was barely audible over the engine, just a faint scrape or shift in the creosote brush on the far side of the car. I froze. The kind of frozen where every part of you listens, not just ears, but muscles, skin, the space in your lungs where breath should be. Something was there. Something bigger than a rabbit. I told myself it was nothing. Just a fox, maybe. But the sound wasn't curious. It was deliberate. Methodical. like it didn't care that I could hear it. I placed the toad in the grass and stepped backward quickly, my shoes crunching dry gravel. I didn't run. I don't know why. My curiosity always outweighs my fear, until it doesn't. Then, as I reached for the car handle, a jackrabbit exploded from the bushes, bounding across the road in two massive leaps. I jumped, adrenaline lighting my chest on fire, then let out a small laugh. I realized I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I do that when I'm scared, hold it like a diver underwater. That night, I helped a few more creatures across the asphalt, tiny rattlesnakes no thicker than a pencil, lizards with blinking orange eyes, each movement a thrill. But I kept glancing over my shoulder. The desert didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. And it was only going to get worse. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I made the decision to take one last lap around a road winding through the foothills. I told myself it was the last time I'd get to be out here for another year, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something rare, something unforgettable, was waiting out there for me. I just didn't know what kind of unforgettable it would be. The farther I drove, the more the road seemed to decay. It narrowed and fractured, the shoulder vanishing, until it felt like my tires were skimming the edge of something more ancient than asphalt. I rolled the windows down to let in the night air. Cool, still, and strange. There was a scent on the wind I couldn't place. Not the usual mineral tang of desert stone or sagebrush. It was older, wet, almost, like the smell of something buried for too long. Up ahead, a whippoorwill burst into flight from the roadside, its white wing spots catching my headlights for the briefest second before vanishing into the trees. I smiled at that. You hardly ever saw one. But then something shifted. All the crickets went silent. Not gradually. 1 second their high chorus was droning, and the next, it stopped. Like someone threw a switch. My first thought was that a predator was near. A hawk. An owl. Maybe a jaguar, silent and watching. But even those wouldn't silence everything. I slowed the car. Just enough to listen. Then the engine died. Not coughed. Not sputtered. Died. Instantly. Lights off. Dashboard dead. No power steering, no AC, just the sound of rubber tires gliding to a halt on loose gravel. My foot hovered over the brake, and I felt that bloom of cold spread out from the base of my spine. It was the kind of fear that doesn't start in the chest or brain. It comes from something deeper, instinctual, animal. I reached for my headlamp on the passenger seat, flicking the button. Nothing. Dead. No click. No red light. No flash. My fingers trembled as I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen stayed black. Everything. Every piece of modern life, every buffer between me and the rawness of the dark, dead. That's when I knew it wasn't a coincidence. One of these things failing? Sure. Batteries die. But the car, the lamp, the phone, at the exact same time? That wasn't random. That was intentional. That was orchestrated. I sat still, not blinking, not breathing. My eyes adjusted slowly. Pale sand between sage and brush came into focus, then distant outlines of cactus and tree. The sky still gleamed with stars, but now it felt wrong, flat, like a painting. The outline of the mountains was just barely visible. But even those started to feel off. Unnatural in their stillness. Then I heard it. The faintest crunch. Footsteps, but slow. Measured. Like something walking without concern. I didn't turn my head. I didn't move. My eyes searched the edge of my vision for movement, anything, until they landed on the top of the ridge. At least, I thought it was the ridge. Something had moved up there. A domed shape. Smooth. Curved like the crown of a head. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust, trying to process what I was seeing. Was it a bush? A trick of moonlight? But then it moved again, rising. No, not rising. Approaching. The shape had been at a distance. That was why it had looked small, like it was part of the mountain. But now it grew larger, creeping forward until I could make out its size more clearly. My stomach flipped when I realized the mountain hadn't moved. The figure had just been that close. Something black, solid, rounded, was standing beside my car. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lock the doors, to do anything. But I couldn't. I was frozen. Trapped. The fear had seized every joint, every tendon. And then, without any sound, click, my doors unlocked. The plastic switch on the driver's side door popped up under my arm. On its own. The kind of gentle, automatic unlock that happens when you put the car in park at the grocery store. Casual. Expected. Not like this. My hand shot to the lock and slammed it back down. I held it there, knuckles white, fingers trembling, pressing with all the force I had. My breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. My lungs burned, and the air felt heavy, tainted. On the other side of the glass, something pulled at the handle. Not violently. Not in a panic. It was calm. Experimental. Like someone who'd forgotten they locked the door. Like someone who had every intention of opening it again. And then, it leaned closer. The shape outside the window stood motionless, just inches from the glass. I couldn't see a face, not exactly, but I knew it was looking at me. I could feel it. That indescribable, primal sensation of being observed, not casually, but with purpose. It was short. No taller than a small adult. But nothing about it felt human. The posture was wrong, too still, too balanced, as if it wasn't affected by gravity in the same way we are. And the darkness around it seemed thicker, clinging to its edges like smoke. My headlights had been off for minutes, and yet it remained silhouetted, outlined just enough to be seen, but never seen clearly. I held the lock down with my full weight, fingers slick with sweat. The handle jiggled again, slightly harder this time. Still calm. Still insistent. Still wrong. I opened my mouth to scream, and that's when I made my second mistake. I inhaled. The air was different now, thick, sweet, and chemical. Like burnt plastic and crushed flowers. Something artificial, acrid, and cloying all at once. My throat closed instantly. A sharp pain stabbed through my sinuses and behind my eyes. It was as if I'd snorted electricity. I coughed hard, once, then again, before I could clamp my mouth shut. My head swam. Outside, the thing remained unfazed. It didn't startle at my coughing. It didn't flinch. Instead, it cocked its head slightly, as if curious. Observing. Then, something moved on the other side of the car. My eyes darted right. There were more of them. At least 3, maybe 4, walking slowly around the car, black forms blotting out patches of stars as they passed. No faces. No features. Just silhouettes shaped like children drawn by someone who had never actually seen one. Their proportions were off, arms too long, torsos too still. One of them reached a hand up and rested it on the passenger window. 5 fingers. But too thin. Too jointed. Each finger moving slightly, independently, like they were tasting the glass. Not tapping, not knocking, stroking. I started hyperventilating. My vision swam. My headlamp still wouldn't turn on, my phone dead in my lap, the car useless. I thought about honking the horn, flashing the lights, anything, but nothing worked. It was as if the entire vehicle had been disarmed. Inside, it felt like the air pressure was dropping. My ears popped. A low hum vibrated through the steering wheel, through my bones. I could feel it in my molars. Not a sound, but a sensation, deep and resonant, like standing too close to a jet engine just before it ignites. Another click. This time from the back. The rear door lock on the passenger side popped up. I hadn't touched that one. No hesitation this time. My body moved before my brain caught up. I lunged across the seat and slammed it back down, nearly falling over the console. As I did, I caught sight of a figure crouched just outside the rear door, inches away. This one was different. It was closer. Too close. Its head was tilted forward, almost pressed to the window. I still couldn't see a face. But there was something there, shifting beneath the darkness. Like smoke moving under skin. Pulsing slightly. It raised a hand and tapped the glass once. A dull, soft thought. I froze. And it did, too. For a second, we were locked in stillness, both holding something sacred and terrible in place. I couldn't tell if I was crying or sweating, but moisture poured down my cheeks and neck in warm rivulets. I reached for the keys. Not because I thought the car would start. Just because I had to try. My hand brushed them, and the engine turned over. Lights flashed. Dashboard blinked. The radio sparked back to life with a burst of static before I shut it off. The figures were gone. Vanished. Not fled. Not run. Gone, like smoke from a blown-out candle. 1 second there were hands on my windows, black bodies outlined against the stars, and the next, only silence and a warm breeze through the open crack of the window. I sat frozen, engine idling, for what felt like hours. Then I started driving. I didn't think. I didn't plan a route. I just drove, faster than I should have, down that broken road, tires kicking dust into the silence. The stars above blurred into a smear of cold light as my vision tunneled. Every twist of the wheel felt like it could tip me into some deeper part of the desert, into some place I wasn't supposed to find. My hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make my knuckles ache, but it felt like the only thing anchoring me to reality. I didn't remember the turns I took. I didn't remember the drive back. The next thing I knew, I was parked outside the motel. The clock on the dashboard said 4:37 a.m. I was slumped forward over the steering wheel, my head resting on the leather, the seatbelt still buckled across my chest. I didn't remember arriving. I didn't remember the road, the exit, the gas station, the last 10 miles. Nothing. Just that 1 second I was alone on that godless stretch of desert road, and the next, I was safe. Or I thought I was. Then I smelled it. The ammonia-sharp scent of urine. It soaked the front of my pants and the seat beneath me. My skin was clammy, cold. Shame burned in my stomach, but it was quickly overtaken by something worse, an understanding. This had not been a dream. This had not been a moment of irrational fear. My body had reacted to something real. I sat there for a long time. The motel's flickering neon sign buzzed gently, casting sickly red and pink pulses across the parking lot. I could see the window to my room, curtains drawn, untouched since I'd left. The silence around me was heavy. Not peaceful. Not calm. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath. That waits. I eventually got out of the car, shaking legs carrying me to the door. I stripped my clothes in the bathroom and showered for an hour, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I checked every inch of my body for marks, bruises, needle punctures, anything. There was nothing. No blood. No scratches. No sign of trauma. But I didn't feel unhurt. I barely slept. The motel room felt wrong, the lights too bright, the walls too thin. I kept expecting to see movement behind the curtains. Kept hearing faint clicks behind the walls. Kept imagining I hadn't escaped, only been let go. And that word, let, bothered me. Because I don't think they wanted to harm me. Not exactly. If they had wanted to, they could have. I was completely helpless, alone, disarmed, unable to scream, unable to move. They could have taken me, killed me, torn me apart. But they didn't. They watched. They tested. They studied. I think I wasn't the predator that night. I was the specimen. And maybe that's worse. I've had time to think since then. Too much time. I've gone over every moment again and again, trying to make sense of it, trying to force some kind of rational answer into a story that defies all logic. People ask me if I was drugged, if I had a psychotic break, if it was sleep deprivation or carbon monoxide poisoning. I've heard all the theories. None of them explain why my car, headlamp, and phone all failed simultaneously. None of them explain the identical reports I found online. Other desert travelers describing silhouettes in the dark, memory lapses, a humming sound just before blackout. None of them explain the dreams I've had since. In them, I'm back in the car. It's always just before the moment, before the locks click. But this time, I don't hold my breath. This time, I inhale when I'm supposed to. I open the door. I step out. I walk into the brush. And the figures step aside, as if I belong with them. I wake up soaked in sweat, heart racing, throat raw from screaming. But worse than that, I wake up smiling. I don't know what to do. I don't even know who I am anymore. There's something inside me and it's not mine. I can't sleep. Can't think. Can't even look at myself anymore. This isn't some cry for help. This isn't fiction. This is me leaving a record, because if I lose everything, and God, I am fucking close, I need someone to know the truth. Because I should be dead. And in some ways, I think I am. It started a year ago. I was 32. Healthy. Normal. Working in a tire factory. The days were long, the hours sucked, but I was alive. I had someone who loved me. I had a little apartment. I had routines. I had a heartbeat. Until I didn't. Cardiac arrest. Out of nowhere. No warning. No tightness. No pain. Just lights out. Face first between two massive OTR tires. My co-worker said my lips were blue by the time they got to me. Paramedics shocked me 3 times on the floor. I flatlined. 6 minutes. No oxygen. No pulse. Then, somehow, I came back. I remember flashes. Needles. Screaming. A nurse crying. The voice of a doctor whispering, he shouldn't be here. But I was. They said I was lucky. A miracle. 1 in a million. I didn't feel like a miracle. I felt wrong. Like something got rewired on the way back. I spent the next 9 months waiting for a donor. My heart was too damaged. They said it was like driving a totaled car. It might move, but eventually it had failed. I lost everything during those 9 months. My girlfriend left me. It's funny how fast someone you thought loved you will vanish the moment you stop being useful. The moment you become a burden. I wasn't sleeping anymore. My skin felt too tight. I jolt awake thinking my heart had stopped. Sometimes, I wished it would. I prayed. I'm not religious, but I prayed. Not just for healing. No, I prayed for something. Anything. For it to end. One way or the other. Then one night, the phone rang. They had a match. A heart. Perfect fit. No complications. It was happening now. I remember being wheeled into the OR, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. The anesthesiologist smiled and said, "This is your second chance." He had no idea how wrong he was. I woke up in a nightmare. I was freezing. Not cold. Freezing. Like I'd been pulled out of a frozen lake. I was drenched in sweat, but my fingertips were blue. My teeth chattered so hard I cracked a molar. My jaw locked. My chest ached, not from the incision, but from something colder behind my sternum. The nurse smiled. "It's the anesthesia," she said. "It'll pass." It didn't. It never did. Even now, I'm always cold. Doesn't matter what I wear. Blankets. Heaters. Hot showers. Nothing helps. It's like something inside me doesn't remember how to hold heat. The cold lives in my bones. In my chest. In my heart. Then the dream started. Always the same. Fluorescent lights. A white-tiled room that smells like bleach and meat. A chair bolted to the floor. Leather restraints cracked with age. Rust-colored stains on the tiles. Someone strapped in. Male, female, young, old, it changes, but they're always gagged. Always wide-eyed. Always trembling. And then there's me. Not me now. Not the scared, half-broken shell scribbling this out. Something inside me. Something standing over them. Watching. Circling. Smiling. There's no sound in the dream. Just this low electrical hum, like a wire buzzing through concrete. The lights flicker. The air tastes like copper and wet stone. In the dream, I'm always holding something. A scalpel. A pipe. A pair of shears. A hammer. A torch. Tools of pain. Tools of ruin. I never see myself use them. But I always wake up with the weight of it still in my hands. Like it came back with me. And the worst part? I enjoy it. I wake up calm. Peaceful. Fists clenched. Breathing slow and steady like I've just finished a sacred ritual. Sometimes there's blood under my fingernails. Wet. Sticky. Other times it's dried into the creases. There are no cuts on me. No wounds. Just that metallic stink on my sheets and the taste in my mouth like burnt pennies. I tried everything. Therapy. Medication. Journaling. Hypnosis. Isolation. My doctor said it was trauma. Psychosomatic cold sensitivity, he called it. Survivor's guilt. PTSD. Post-operative delusions. None of that explains the scar. Not the one across my chest. That's expected. I signed up for that. This one was on the inside of my left forearm. A thin, pale X healed over like it had been there for years. But it hadn't. I know my body. I know every freckle, every scar, every stupid mole. That X wasn't mine. Not before. That's when I went to an old friend, someone in medical billing. Someone with access to records. To transplant data. I begged him. I begged him to find the name of my donor. He said it was sealed. But a bottle of bourbon and a breakdown on his couch changed that. He pulled it up. Just a few notes, nothing with names. But I'll never forget the look on his face. Like something had gone rancid in the air. "Oh, shit," he whispered. "You're not gonna want to know this." But I did. I needed to. The name was redacted. But the profile wasn't. Convicted murderer. Torture. 9 confirmed victims. Multiple ages. Held them in a basement. Soundproofed. White tiles. Fluorescent lighting. Leather restraints. Just like my dreams. He turned himself in. No remorse. No plea. Just walked into a police station one morning and said, "My work is complete." He died on death row. No family to claim the body. But he'd signed the organ donor form. And his heart was still good. So now, it's mine. Things got worse after that. I started blacking out. Not sleepwalking. Not zoning out. Gone. I'd come to in alleys. In stairwells. Parking garages. Once in a supply closet, hands shaking, a box cutter in my grip and blood swirling in the sink. I told myself it was stress. Told myself I'd snap. That it was in my head. But I knew better. I started noticing the smells first. Bleach. Rust. Damp concrete. Following me. Clinging to me like a second skin. And then came the urges. I'd sit in my car outside grocery stores. Just watching. People. Their little routines. Their weaknesses. The way they checked their phones instead of their surroundings. The way they left their doors unlocked. The way they trusted the night. I'd imagine what they'd look like when they screamed. How they'd sound. What they'd say if I let them beg. One night I followed a woman for 7 blocks before I even realized what I was doing. I was 2 steps from her building when I snapped out of it. Hands clenched so hard my nails left half moons in my palms. I ran. Collapsed in the street. Threw up in a gutter. I swore I'd never do it again. But the next night, I dreamed of her face. I saw her strapped in that chair. I saw myself, leaning close, whispering something I couldn't hear. And I smiled. I went back to the hospital. Stormed into the transplant center. Found the surgeon who'd done the operation. I told him I wanted it out. The heart. I didn't care what it meant. He just smiled. A calm, smug kind of smile. "You're alive," he said. "That heart saved you." No. It replaced me. Then came the worst night. I woke up in my bathtub. Fully clothed. Soaked. A knife was resting on the tub's edge. Clean. Balanced. Like it had been placed there gently. My hands were covered in blood. My clothes were soaked with it. My mouth tasted like iron. There were splatters on the tile, smears on the door frame, footprints down the hall. The blood wasn't mine. I checked every inch of my body. Again. And again. And again. Not a scratch. I checked the news. Police reports. Nothing. No missing person. No break-ins. No body. Maybe he's smarter now. Maybe he's learning through me. I haven't slept since. I won't. Because he doesn't dream. He remembers. He relives. And now, so do I. Every flicker of the lights. Every scream. Every second in that room. It's like a film running in my veins. On a loop. Not a haunting. Not a possession. Not a voice in my head. Is beating inside me. He doesn't ask permission. He doesn't whisper. He moves. I tried to resist. I really did. I locked the knives away. I stopped going out after dark. I threw out the clothes that came back blooded. I deleted the dreams. Forced myself not to write. Not to remember. It didn't matter. He's patient. He doesn't need me alert. He just needs me breathing. Sometimes I feel him waiting. Like a hand just behind my ribs. Resting. Watching. Biding his time. Last week, I woke up with fingerprints on my neck. My own hands. Pressed hard. Like I was trying to choke him out of me. But I couldn't. You can't kill something that's already dead. And he is. Dead. Buried. Burned. Ashes scattered. But the heart survived. It remembered the rhythm. It remembered the thrill. And now it's mine. So last night, I gave in. I picked up the knife again. I didn't drop it this time. There was no hesitation. No trembling. My grip was firm. Familiar. Like coming home. I walked into the street, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel lost. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't sobbing. I wasn't cold. Not even a little. That's what scares me the most. Not the blood. Not the silence after the screams. Not even the faces that I know will visit me again, strapped to that chair in my dreams. It's the calm. The warmth. Like I've finally made peace with the thing inside me. Like I've stopped fighting it. Because maybe I was never supposed to fight. Maybe this is who I was always meant to be. A second chance, that wasn't mine. A life stolen and stitched together with someone else's nightmare. Is not haunting me. He is me. So if you're reading this, don't call the police. Don't try to help. Don't come looking. Because I won't be the one who answers the door. And if you hear footsteps behind you in a parking garage or a flicker of lights in an empty hallway, don't turn around. Just run. Because I've finally stopped feeling cold. And that means he's wide awake. My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea. And that's fine. But that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. Geez, Lynn, I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. You scared the shit out of me. She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door she was out of sight. It was really weird, and just totally out of character for her like I said, but I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her, and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m. and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide unblinking eyes and grinning. Grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed, I'll admit it. Not out of irritation but fear. For some reason at that moment I was scared. At the sound of my scream Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her, or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep. Or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she really was asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed. But she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep and I was starting to wonder if I'd dreamt the whole thing. The next morning I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again. From over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that," I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time. So I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly. Just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her. But it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid propped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth was she doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m. I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again, and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you. But joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house, and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize, or to call me a jerk. But instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet I wondered if I heard it at all, and then complete silence. Lynn? I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response. Just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, just fucking stop it. I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before. But there was nothing. Just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared. Too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers, and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion, and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold. Maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I'd had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams. All of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that, when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. "Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home," I shouted. "Now." She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs. As if Lynn could hear them from her place outside, her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned my cell off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her. That no matter what promises she made would never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon I figured I was ready to confront her. Give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she'd sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. "Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home." And more of the same. All texts telling me she loved me, and she wanted me home. How worried she was, not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from this situation. But if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry, because it's not my place. But is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know. She's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben. But she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed. She said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife. But how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No. She just asked if you were awake yet and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you but she said no. Just said to let you sleep. She said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. No. She looked awful though. Like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I swore an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believed she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting. But this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong. Dangerous even. Like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. So I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We'd never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person, and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable. Like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So I grit my teeth and did what I had to. Yes? She answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said, coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior? Or possibly any mental health issues? I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking, or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind? She said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well. I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me. She snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please. If not for me, do it for Lynn. I tried. I heard a faint shaky intake of breath, as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together but failing. Marianne? What's wrong? I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while I almost gave up, until I remembered her last words to me. Seek professional help, she'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no, I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she'd said that. As if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter. How she'd hidden in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube. Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second I thought would see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. What do you guys use to clean the floors around here? Shit. Chris mumbled. Shut up. I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. Why the fuck are you looking under the couch? Chris asked eventually. Aren't we looking for your wife? He was looking at me like I was a moron. Let's just go upstairs. I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something? Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them, and shuddered at the thought. Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction. But fuck me. Your wife's in here collecting eyeballs. Chris said, gagging. Ben, I think we should go. He called from the hall. I'm getting nauseous. All right. I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and I couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that? Chris mumbled. I tried to tell you she needed help. I said. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist. He said. You coming or what? I can't stand the smell any. His words died in his throat and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making. A sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving to say the least. Wide eyes, and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you? Can you let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn. I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide open mouth and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better, and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding. I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from in between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn. You're bleeding. I said. Instinctively I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. You all right in there? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. Are you bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. Chris. Run. Go. I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn. Chris said, "You are playing hide and seek." I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. "Move your ass, Chris," I said as quietly but firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. "I only want to help," I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ears so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard, talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with police. I watched the rearview mirror, sure I'd see her there, running after us. But I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her, maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needs. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "I found you." And a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. We thought it was just a late-night road trip, but we found a town that doesn't exist. You ever have one of those moments where you're laughing with your friends, the road stretching endlessly ahead, music low in the background, and for a second, just 1 second, you feel like you've outrun time? That's what it felt like. We were 4 kids with no real responsibilities, no destination, and no idea that we were about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I had just turned 17, freshly armed with my graduated license and an aching desire to feel free. No more curfew. No more parents texting every hour. To celebrate, I pitched a spontaneous idea to my friends: let's take a night drive into the Adirondacks. Just far enough to feel like we were escaping. Cody, my best friend since 5th grade, was instantly in. Tom, the impulsive wild card of the group, just grinned and threw his hoodie on. Sammy, the new freshman we'd taken under our wing, was eager to prove he could hang with the older guys. We left late, around 6:30 p.m. Later than we planned. The sky was painted with soft pastels, the sun starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the Northway. The Adirondack Northway, Interstate 87, starts in Albany and cuts all the way to the Canadian border. But once you pass Lake George, it changes. The exits get sparse. The cell service vanishes. You start to feel like you're not just leaving the city, you're leaving the map. At first, it was perfect. Music up, windows down. We talked about everything. Girls, school, how much we hated AP classes. We joked about summer jobs and made ridiculous bets about who'd get into college first. Classic teenage stuff. But the deeper we drove, the darker it got, and the quieter. No street lights. No cars. Just the hum of the tires and the occasional flicker of deer eyes in the woods. Then, Bing. A glowing orange warning appeared on my dash. Please refuel. I hadn't even noticed how far we'd gone. Sammy pulled up Google Maps, and we realized we'd been driving north for nearly 3 hours. Over 250 miles from home. That knot in my stomach started to form, but Tom, as always, laughed it off. Dude, it's fine. There's gotta be a station nearby. Almost on cue, a blue sign appeared. Exit 39S, services available, New France. None of us had ever heard of New France. But in that moment, it didn't matter. It had gas. We pulled off. The exit ramp curved into a narrow, unlit road flanked by thick pine and silence. No houses. No lights. Just wilderness pressing in on both sides like it was trying to reclaim the pavement. Still, after about 3 miles, a small mobile station emerged out of the dark. 2 pumps. A squat little convenience store. Everything felt faded. Like it had been there too long. We were the only car. I pulled up to the pump while Cody and Sammy stretched their legs. Tom, ever the bottomless pit, announced he was grabbing snacks and disappeared inside. We filled up quickly. I glanced at the price, cash only, but shrugged it off. I just wanted to get home. We waited in the car. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. No Tom. Sammy tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. His stupid custom greeting echoed into the car. Hey, it's your favorite person. Leave a message if you're worthy. By the 20-minute mark, I was irritated. I got out and went inside, ready to drag him out by his hoodie. The store was off. The air was stale, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A faint smell of burnt coffee hung in the air. But there was no cashier. No music. No TV. No one. Just rows of snacks and emptiness. I called out for Tom. Nothing. Then, the lights died. Everything. Pitch black. The kind of black where your breath gets caught in your chest and your ears strain for sound that never comes. Outside, I heard the car doors slam. I ran back and found Cody and Sammy pale as ghosts. Something followed you in, Cody whispered. It wasn't Tom. I was about to argue when a low, growling sound echoed from behind the building. Not animal. Not human. Just wrong. I slammed the gas. We peeled out. The tires kicked up gravel and I didn't look back. We drove for 15 minutes, but the ramp back to the interstate never came. Just trees. Trees that looked familiar but not quite. Sammy pulled out his phone. There's no New France here, he said, scrolling. Exit 39S doesn't exist. I told him to check again. He did. Same result. Exit 39N was listed. So was 39E. But no 39S. The place we had just been? Gone. Then I saw it. A figure walking alongside the road. Distant, but getting closer. I raised my phone and zoomed in. My heart stopped. It had Tom's face. No, worried. Like a mask. But everything else was wrong. The way it moved, too tall, limbs bending wrong, like a puppet animated by something that didn't understand anatomy. It walked with a twitch, like it was learning. Then it smiled. Not a human smile. A grotesque grin stretched too wide, teeth too square, eyes too flat. That's when it screamed. A guttural, inhuman shriek that made the car vibrate. I floored it. We hit the thing. There was a sickening thud, but I never slowed down. I couldn't. Inside the car, no one spoke. Sammy was crying. Cody just kept whispering Tom's name over and over. I glanced at the dashboard. 90 miles of range left. That didn't make sense. We'd filled the tank 30 minutes ago. I was sure we had over 300 miles. And then I noticed the time. 10:30 p.m. Still. Same as when we'd left the gas station. We had stopped moving through time. The road twisted again. The forest grew denser. I pulled over, barely keeping my hands steady. Sammy had 1 bar of service, just enough to load an old travel guide. That's when we knew we weren't just lost. We were somewhere else. Then footsteps. We turned. Tom was standing at the tree line. Or something that looked like him. But he was too tall. his arms too long. Skin stretched like wax, his face flickering like a faulty projector. Eyes glassy, lifeless. I asked it to let you go, he said. It said yes, but I have to stay. We were frozen. He continued, don't come back. Not for me. Not for anyone. This place, it was never ours. And I'm the price for our trespassing. He handed me a folded map, yellowed, creased, damp. It felt old, real, like it had weight. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. He turned and walked back into the woods. We never saw him again. We followed the map. It took us down roads that didn't exist on GPS trails that looked abandoned for decades. But we trusted it. It felt like something ancient had given us one chance, and this was it. And then, out of nowhere, a sign. Dark blue. White letters. 87. We hit the ramp like it was salvation. We didn't stop until we saw Albany streetlights again. We got home just before dawn. Our parents yelled at us. Grounded us. But nothing about Tom. No one remembered him. Not at school. Not his family. Not even in photos. Where his face once was, just a gap. A space where someone should be. Even the playlists he made? Gone. He wasn't just missing. He'd been erased. A week later, an envelope arrived. No stamp. No name. Just one handwritten line. Stay out of our territory. The house was a steal. That should have been the first red flag. A 3-bedroom craftsman with a wraparound porch for less than the cost of my cramped 2-bedroom apartment. It was in a quiet, secluded subdivision called Maple Creek, where all the lawns were impossibly green and the neighbors waved with all 5 fingers. The HOA president, a woman named Carol with a smile as bright and hard as a porcelain doll's, met me on my first day. She handed me a welcome basket with a bottle of cheap Chardonnay and a single, laminated sheet of paper. We're so glad to have you, Mark, she said, her eyes crinkling in a way that didn't seem genuine. We're very relaxed here at Maple Creek. We don't have rules about lawn height or fence colors. We only have one. She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the laminated sheet. On it, in a large, friendly font, were the words. Rule number 1. If you see a pet that appears lost or in distress, do not approach it. Do not feed it. Do not let it into your home. Go inside, lock your doors, and ignore it until it has gone. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. What? Are the raccoons organized crime around here? Carol's smile didn't waver. It's not a suggestion, Mark. It's the only thing we require of you. It is for the safety and harmony of the community. Her tone was light, but her eyes were deadly serious. It was the first time I felt a chill in the warm afternoon air. For the first month, it was perfect. Quiet. Peaceful. I almost forgot about the bizarre rule. I'd see people walking their dogs on leashes, cats sunning themselves on porches. They were clearly owned, clearly where they were supposed to be. The rule seemed like a weird quirk from a bygone era. Then came the storm last night. It was a real gully washer, with thunder that shook the windows and rain that came down in sheets. It was around midnight when I heard it, a sound that cut through the noise of the storm. A pathetic, high-pitched whine. I peered through my living room window. Huddled under the eave of my porch, shivering and soaked, was a golden retriever. It was beautiful, with big, sad eyes and a leather collar, but no tags. Every time the thunder cracked, it would press itself against my door and cry. My heart broke. The laminated card was sitting on my counter, and Carol's words echoed in my head. Go inside, lock your doors, and ignore it. But how could I? It was just a dog. A scared, lost animal. What was the worst that could happen? I'd be breaking some stupid, arbitrary rule from a power-tripping HOA president. So I did it. I opened the door. The dog practically fell inside, shaking a puddle onto my hardwood floor. It looked up at me with such gratitude, nudging its wet head into my hand. I got it a towel and a bowl of water, and it immediately settled down on my rug, letting out a contented sigh. I felt a wave of relief. See? Just a dog. I fell asleep on the couch watching TV. I was woken up a few hours later by a sound that wasn't the storm. A knock. A slow, deliberate knock on my front door. The rain had stopped. The dog on the floor lifted its head, let out a low growl, and then, strangely, trotted to the door, its tail giving a single, lazy wag. I looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a man. He was tall, impossibly tall, dressed in a neat, old-fashioned suit, like a door-to-door salesman from the 1950s. He was smiling, a wide, friendly smile that showed too many teeth, all of them perfectly straight and white. I opened the door a crack, my hand still on the chain. "Can I help you?" "Good evening," the man said, his voice smooth and pleasant. "I do apologize for the late hour. I believe you found my dog." He gestured with his head toward the retriever, who was now sitting patiently at his feet, looking up at him. "Oh, yeah, he was out in the storm," I said, my relief making me feel foolish for ever being scared. "Glad you found him." The tall man's smile widened, stretching his face in a way that felt unnatural. "He has a habit of getting out. He's a bit of a rascal." He leaned forward, his eyes, dark and unblinking, locking onto mine. "But he's very good at his job." My blood ran cold. His job. The man chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. He reached down and patted the dog's head. "Of course," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "His job is to find the kindest person in the neighborhood." He straightened up, his towering frame seeming to block out all the light from the porch. "Thank you so much for your hospitality," the man said, his smile finally reaching his eyes, which now glinted with a terrifying, hungry light. "He likes you very much. He's decided he wants you to meet the rest of the family." My mind screamed at me to slam the door. Slam it, lock it, run. But my body wouldn't obey. I was a statue, my hand frozen on the door. The man's smile never faltered as he gave the door a gentle push. The brass security chain didn't snap or break. It stretched, elongating like taffy with a soft, metallic groan before falling away, limp and useless. "There now," he said pleasantly. "That's better." He didn't enter. He simply took a step back and gestured with an open palm toward the street. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And for reasons I can't explain, I found myself stepping out onto the porch. The golden retriever trotted ahead of us, its tail held high. The air was different out here. The storm had washed everything clean, but the world felt muted, like I was looking at it through a pane of smoked glass. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and twist at the edges of my vision. As we walked, I noticed other things. A sleek black cat emerged from beneath a hedge, its eyes glowing with a faint phosphorescence. It fell into step beside the retriever. A few houses down, a parrot was perched on a mailbox. It didn't squawk or speak, it just swiveled its head, tracking our progress in perfect silence. They were all moving with us. An honor guard of silent, watchful animals. I looked at the houses we passed. Through their big picture windows, I could see my neighbors. They were frozen in place, like mannequins in elaborate dioramas. One family was sitting around a dinner table, forks raised halfway to their mouths. In another house, a man was stopped mid-stride, 1 foot hovering over the floor. They were all facing our direction, their faces blank, their eyes wide and vacant. "Don't mind them," the tall man said, noticing my gaze. "They're very good at following the rules." We were heading toward the end of the cul-de-sac, to the oldest house on the block, a large colonial that had been dark and seemingly empty since I'd moved in. As we got closer, I could feel a low vibration through the soles of my shoes, a deep hum that seemed to emanate from the house itself. The golden retriever led the procession up the walkway and sat patiently before the heavy oak door. The other animals formed a silent, semicircle behind us, their eyes all fixed on me. The tall man walked to the door. It swung open before he touched it, revealing nothing but a deep, impenetrable darkness inside. The low hum grew louder, resonating in my bones. It sounded like a purr. A gigantic, hungry purr. The man turned to me, his smile as wide and terrifying as ever. He gestured into the blackness. "After you," he said. "They've been so looking forward to this."